Yeah, so thanks you guys for joining. This is the first time we've really done something like this. So feedback afterwards is always welcome. Let us know if you feel like this is helpful, if you want to continue doing stuff like this in the future. But essentially we have Ruhub here. I think hopefully most of you guys are familiar with Ask Data. You've had a chance to check out the demo that we posted in the user group leader community or watch some of the live events and things like that. So he just wanted to get a chance to connect with you guys and answer any questions that you may have. If you want to see anything in action, let him know. Or general feedback about the product. So yeah, I'll let Ruhab, if you have anything you want to intro before we open it up, feel free.
Thanks, Jordan. So my name is Ruhab Marcus, and I lead product management for Ask Data, based here in Palo Alto, right outside of San Francisco. And as Jordan mentioned, really this is just an opportunity for everyone to ask questions directly to the team. More than happy to share any insights. So really, this is just for everyone here. So thank you for making the time, and look forward to the discussion.
So who wants to be brave and go first? If you guys want to chat and stuff too, if that's easier, you're welcome to as well if you're not in a spot that you can really chat.
So is this just kind of open-ended?
Yep.
There's no direction, just whatever goes?
Yep. No, he just wanted to try to connect with you guys. So whether you have questions or feedback, really we just wanted to make him available as a resource for you guys if anything has come up while you've been using it or talking about it or maybe presenting it at your user groups if questions have come up and things like that.
I think it would be helpful maybe to talk about the current state of Ask Data at a high level, and then maybe some things that are in development. I know that there's probably a wish list of features and functions that it can do. So I just want to make sure that we're not wasting time or taking up something that's maybe already on the books for in development.
Sure.
Is that anything you can talk to?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me actually just do a quick screen share, and maybe can just walk through a couple of examples. Can everyone see my screen here?
Looks good.
Yep. Okay, awesome. And I think I just let me just log in real quick. So feel free to share any feedback, irrespective of whether you think it's something we've thought of or not. If it's something on the roadmap, the feedback actually still helps us validate our approach on certain features or certain improvements. So any feedback is welcome. And I'm still logging in here.
I have a quick one.
Sure.
Just one of the things that, as we were kind of presenting for, this is actually internal, not even for our user group, but we're kind of trying to roll it out here at my company. We were one of the other developers and I, we were kind of hoping, we see the list of fields in the left-hand pane. Is it ever going to be, or is this kind of out of scope for the product ability for you to drag and drop those fields in the writing pane?
That's a great question, and we actually hear that feedback every now and then. So currently, we don't have any plans to enable drag and drop. We've kind of put together some hackathon type projects of having that capability. Really, ultimately, we want to expose Ask Data outside of the data source. So the vision is for it to be much more ubiquitous in the product, where you could ask questions really where they arise. You can answer the questions when they actually come up in the analytical workflow. And that might be when you're consuming a visualization or a pre-authored dashboard. Imagine being able to ask questions directly through that, or even having a blended view of, authoring and Ask Data. So how the tool is positioned is certainly going to grow and become much more integrated outside of the current experience, which is just in the data source, which may lend itself to having a blended drag and drop and question asking experience. So I'd love to kind of ask you, what what would that enable for you being able to ask questions and drag and drop? Like what, how helpful is that for you, and how do you envision kind of using that?
So for now, because it is in that limited, and I totally get where you're coming from, and that would be awesome to be in a viz and just ask questions right there, so I can see the limitations there. But for now, I think that that what we've noticed is, we want to kind of get people already in that mindset of dragging and dropping, and as part of the 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 building process. So if they're already familiar, if they come in from, just because we're planning on rolling it out to a lot of our, our executives and senior leadership team. And so they're familiar, they get in there and they see the fields and they're like, oh, well, instead of just asking and waiting for the, as you type, you've got to wait for it to read through all the data and render. If I can just say, okay, oh, there's the sales field or whatever, and I drag and drop that into the thing, and then I'm kind of typing, again, that kind of mixed medium where you're dragging and dropping and typing in there all at once. I think that would get them already in that kind of ecosystem where they're now familiar with, this is how I can now interact with my data.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And we're certainly heading that way in sort of the medium term. So thanks for that feedback. And I agree that sort of, that blended experience will really help just make it much more seamless and actually help people learn the tool a little bit more. And so I think that's a great bit of feedback. And we're certainly heading that way. I'll just say that.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. So Jordan, looks like we have a few chat questions. I may just kind of run through them. And
yep. Absolutely. If you want me to read them out to you, I totally can.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Perfect. So the first one from Bonnie is, what's the plan for rolling out outside of server environments?
So currently, Ask Data is available both for Tableau Online and for Tableau Server. Bonnie, would you be able to kind of give any insights as to what other environments you were hoping to be able to leverage Ask Data? Desktop. So currently, so Tableau Desktop is really intended for the advanced Tableau user. And so if you think about who has access to Tableau Desktop, it's really our creators and individuals who are publishing new content and data. We envision Ask Data being leveraged sort of by a less sophisticated user. However, we have received more feedback about enabling on Tableau Desktop. And I think the really interesting utility there is for individuals who are publishing data models to server to be able to test Ask Data before that model is published. So that's becoming a little bit more of a pertinent use case for us, and I'm certainly evaluating that. The original plan was to not incorporate desktop in the short term, but as we think about how creators of data models need to be able to rapidly test Ask Data to ensure that they've structured and curated the data in a way that's successful for their users, I think desktop becomes a little bit more important through that lens. So it's something we're certainly evaluating. Awesome.
All right, so next one, can Ask Data understand a within question for custom polygons?
So currently, I don't believe that we can handle custom polygons, but we're in active conversations with our maps team to sort of kind of really understand sort of how we can elevate the geographic and spatial analysis experience with Ask Data. So unfortunately, custom polygons are not supported just yet, but hopefully we have a plan for supporting that in the short term.
Awesome. And how will we be able to control who has access to Ask Data, or what tables are able to be asked?
So Ask Data works on a denormalized data structure. So it has to be a flattened representation of the data. And the data actually has to be published to Tableau Server as well. That will continue to grow. We want to be able to handle more disparate data and things like that. So Ask Data has to be published to Tableau Server, and you would control access to Ask Data using our current permissions model. So anyone who has connect access to to the data source can leverage Ask Data. So you can use that permission toggle to disable connect privileges at whatever level of abstraction is useful for you. But you can also turn ask data on and off at the data source level. So through the UI directly, you can go in and manage those ask data permissions. So just to reiterate, there's two ways of managing those controls. One is through connect permissions, and the second is the actual ask data throttle on and off at the data source level.
Awesome. And then kind of a similar kind of follow-up question from Matthew is how would it work with row level permissioning of tables, and is it compatible with username?
Yeah, so row level permissions, any of the permissions that you've structured in your data sources is inherited with ask data. So with row level security, we don't index the values of the data source for exactly that reason, because there is such like a unique sort of permission model built in at the user level. So you would be able to leverage ask data at a more aggregated view, but we don't index the values for data sources of row level permissions. And I don't think I fully understand the question, is it compatible with username? What do you mean by that exactly, Matthew?
And Matthew, you're welcome to either unmute yourself or you can chat it in if that's easier.
I don't want to speak for Matthew, but I think that when we saw the demo from the product team last time, if using a username on data source filtering, it wouldn't index the data to use ask data. You can still use ask data, but you have to be literal with the fields. So I don't know if that's what he was referring to. But is there any plans then at some point to support it natively so it knows who logs in and just index it that way?
Yeah, so we're certainly thinking through that use case of how do you kind of self-identify yourself so that you can ask questions that automatically filter yourself to that username. So that's one aspect is how can the system self-identify the user? The second aspect is, oh, Matthew said that answer question. That answer got a question, or that answer, the question was answered perfectly. Okay, great. The second aspect, whoever was speaking there, is the indexing. Ask data, there's a certain amount of rules in terms of what kinds of fields are indexed. One of the rules is for long multi-token strings, so anything over 2 or 3 tokens is not indexed because it introduces a lot of errors into our ability to kind of parse everything. So we're looking at giving more flexible control on those indexing rules. So that might be another reason why that username was not being indexed.
Awesome. We have Doug on the line as well. He works at a cancer hospital, and he said they're just getting started rolling out Tableau server. And do you have any advice about getting started on rolling this feature out?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say one of the first things to really understand is who are the users in your organization that would benefit from a self-service tool like Ask Data? And for those users, what are the questions of interest? And so what are the kinds of data sources that they would need access to? So really, it's sort of a discovery exercise to understand who would like to leverage the tool, what questions they have, so that you can kind of point them towards the right data sources or publish the data sources that are relevant for them. And then have a close feedback loop with a small group of users to understand what kind of value they're generating from that. And then use that as a test case to essentially scale this out to your broader organization. So I always recommend kind of taking a more of a focal approach first, just to prove the concept out in the organization, and then use that as a data point to scale it out.
Awesome. Is there a future for embedding Ask data into external applications, like the embedding API maybe?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And we are in active discussions of figuring out our API strategy. In 2019.3, we are introducing our first embeddable offering, which is just a web iframe that you could use to embed into your internal applications. So this year we'll certainly be introducing our first embedded offering, and then working towards you know being able to support a suite of APIs as well. So the first step is the iframe, and then we're certainly working towards an API as well.
Cool. And the next question, can synonyms be loaded from a file or be common across data sets? Sounds like they have data sources with standard column names and they want to be able to leverage synonyms across all data sets.
Yeah, I love that question. And synonyms are handled sort of in two ways right now. There's automatically enriched synonyms, which get added by our semantic model. And things like geography, there's a lot of, semantic sort of properties that we automatically enrich in all the data sources. And then there's manually added synonyms. So you would do that currently by going into the UI and adding synonyms at the field level. We're investing a lot of our time and energy and resources into sort of the semantic layer of Ask Data and Tableau. So our vision is really to help kind of create an ontology framework that can scale based on your organizational needs. And applying and recommending synonyms more programmatically is work in progress. So we're hoping to leverage the same concept as data roles that exist in Tableau Prep, where we can automatically classify the type of data role associated with your data and recommend the synonyms that would be applicable for that specific data role, which would also allow you to scale that across all of your data sources that share a similar field. So we are absolutely moving towards a world where synonyms is much more horizontal and programmatically recommended to your data. And hopefully we're not too far away from that.
Perfect. So Andy kind of just had a +1 for yes, testing the response from Ask Data would be a good thing, but a clarifying question, extracts would need to be needed instead of live connections for data.
Yeah, so Ask Data does work with both live and extracts. Extracts, have their benefits for a variety of reasons. For live data sources, we don't index the values for live connections, so it's more of an aggregated view. So that's the one distinction. They're both supported, but that is the one key difference between those two connections with Ask Data.
Awesome. Are there any resources or best practices for creating data sources to get the best performance?
So that is more of I think a general, Tableau, I think recommendation. There's a lot of really good articles out there around how you can get the best performance out of your data source. There's actually another element which is relevant for Ask Data is how can you curate your data source and structure the data model in a way that it just creates a better interaction for the people consuming it and using it. So we've published a lot of white papers and articles on how to best curate your data source for Ask Data. But I think we can certainly start to layer in some best practices with performance on that as well. So I think you can find a lot of really good articles right now on just how you can kind of tune and optimize your data sources for performance. And we've also recently, as I mentioned, just published articles on curating data sources specifically for Ask Data usage. And I'd be happy to drop that link in here if it's helpful.
Yeah, and if you want to send those to me too, I can attach them when I post the link to the recording.
Okay, I'll do that.
Awesome. So next one, what can we expect with the layout tab? Are we getting closer to PowerPoint-like formatting?
I don't really have a strong perspective here just yet. I think this is more of a Tableau question, and I don't really work on layouts. So I can take that bit of feedback to the respective team and get an answer for you.
Perfect. Is there any way to see the questions that have already been asked of the data specifically to identify gaps in existing dashboards and analysis?
That is a great question. And let me actually just do a quick screen share because it might be helpful to demonstrate some of the new functionality that we built. So let me just get the right screen up. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, The answer is yes. In 2019.2, which is in beta right now, we've introduced a new usage analytics tab, which allows data source owners and server admins to look at usage patterns of their data source from Ask Data. So really our goal there was to help inform the people creating data content and give them insights into how people are using the data with Ask Data, what kinds of questions are asking, what sort of fields are being used, so that they can do a variety of things. They can curate the data source in a way that supports the kinds of questions that are being asked. And then it can also, as you mentioned, give you insights into the most prominent questions that are being asked, so that you can make sure that they're reflected in your dashboards. So let me finally have my screen up. Let me get a quick screen share going, and I will show you that. So here I am in Ask Data, and you'll notice that there's this new usage analytics button here. And clicking on that would give you this view into all of the usage insights for that particular data source. So you would get insights like how many people are using it, what are the total amount of queries, how many of those queries were actually selected, what are the top fields that are being leveraged in the data source, and then all of the queries information as well. So the suggested results are sort of the canonical NLG. So when you actually select interpretation, this is sort of a frequency count of that. And if you want to see the raw questions themselves, you can toggle to the user queries as well. So that is something that we've already built in 2019.2, and it's available in beta today if you'd like to try it out.
Can you stay here for a second? So I have an add-on question. So the queries right there, that's the interpretation that Tableau does based on the question. That's not necessarily the language that the user's using, correct?
The suggested results is the language that Tableau uses. So once you type a question in and select the result, that's the suggested result. The user queries is the actual question itself. So you can imagine suggested results being helpful because a lot of, there's a lot of variance in how you would express a singular intent. So 5 questions may actually yield the same suggested result. So it's helpful to see kind of both views, right? Suggested results, because that's more of an aggregated view of all the intents. And then just the raw queries themselves, just to understand how people are, engaging with the system.
Okay. And is any of this data shared with Tableau or AI to improve things? I guess we'd want to know if any of this information somehow is pushed to Tableau for analysis.
Yeah, so this information is stored in a local instance of Postgres. So for Tableau server customers, this information is not shared with Tableau. This kind of just lives locally for you to access. So there's no sharing of information there. So I'm assuming that was your question. Yeah. So for Tableau server, it's not shared. For Tableau online, we do collect some information.
Oh, you do collect it. Okay.
Yeah, if you're
on online.
Yes, for Tableau online.
Okay. Is there a way to disable that, or it's just part of the agreement?
That is part of our standard agreement, but if you want to kind of deep dive on that, I'd love to maybe kind of take that conversation offline and learn more about what kind of options would be useful for you. Are you online or a Tableau server?
Both.
Okay. So I will share my contact information if anyone wants to have follow-up conversations, and we'd be happy to take that offline.
Thanks.
Awesome. So next question, does Ask Data respect the permissions and security set by the data source to not allow downloading or exporting of the underlying data?
Yeah, so any permissions that have been created for the data source are all inherited by Ask Data. So there's nothing additional you need to do to enforce them. If you've already set those permissions, all of them are respected.
Awesome. And I know this is a question I've heard a lot as well, but what's the roadmap for Ask Data supporting other languages?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So our, we certainly want to enable Ask Data on all of our supported languages. But if we can't nail the English language first, then there's not really a point to roll other languages out. So we just launched 2 months ago, and we're still going through the exercise, just making sure that we have a just really robust experience natively in English US. And then we'll continue to kind of layer in other languages as well. But the goal is to enable it for all of our supported languages.
Awesome. Would it be possible to see all of the synonyms being used across a platform by different users for data sources and fields to help develop a business glossary, or to provide a developed business glossary to steer people to use the right terms in Ask Data?
Yeah, great question. And there's sort of two threads to that. There's the business glossary, and then there's sort of the semantic metadata aspect as well. So our new data management sort of bundle is absolutely tackling the business glossary problem, where you can build that shared glossary across all of your content, and that's consumed by the data model as well, so that you could take advantage of all the descriptions and constraints that you set on that, and that's very visible and apparent to the users at the time of analysis. So our data management feature is absolutely tackling that problem. And I mentioned earlier, we're heading towards a world where we're looking at more programmatic handling and recommendations of synonyms, which will absolutely then give you some sort of perspective as to how what synonyms are being used across a platform in a more aggregated view. So currently, you would have to go at the individual data source level and look at the synonyms at the field level. But we do want to enable a more holistic view for admins.
Perfect. Are the results of the analytics available to everyone, or is it limited to the data sets that the users have access to?
Yeah, so the results of the analytics are actually only available to server admins and the owner of the data source. Given that there's just some kind of sensitive information around what kind of questions people are asking and who's using the feature, we want to limit that just to more administrative functions of Tableau. They are fully able to share that information as they best see fit, but right now it's limited to server admins and the owner of the data source itself.
Cool. And then Ryan had a kind of a +1 to Michael's point. Is there specific privacy information that you could share with me to attach with this recording as well?
Yeah, so I would just recommend attaching our privacy policy and our EULA. All of our privacy sort of perspectives are very accurately reflected there.
Okay, awesome. Is Ask Data able to do wildcard text searches in the current release?
Yes, you can do wildcard text searches, and maybe I can just give you a quick example of that. There's two ways to do wildcard searches. So, for example, if I look at categories, I may look at category contains something like that. And you can see that I just simply typed in category contains FURN, and then we can find that, resolve that to furniture. You can also, if you have filters in place, so let's look at average sales by customer. You can also leverage, actually customer name is probably not the best one. I'll just use the same example by category. You can also, let's see. Okay, sorry, let me just try one quick example. Average sales for each state. Let's say I add some filters like Texas and Ohio. So if you have filtered values in play in the query, you can use our refinement UI to click into any of these phrases here. So I'm clicking to the values, and then you can use a wildcard search for specific values as well. So that's the kind of two ways you can use wildcard searches. One directly in line with the natural language input. And then for any value filters that you have, you can click into those as well and add or exclude other values using our wildcard search.
Awesome. All right. If we don't need the full hour, that's okay, but that was the end of the questions that have come through. Does anyone have anything else or any feedback or anything they'd like Ruhab maybe to show you guys?
That was great. Thank you.
Awesome. Give everyone another minute or two. Ruhab, do you have any like favorite maybe like tips and tricks for Ask Data that you'd want to share really quick? Will we give people a minute or two to ask any final questions?
Sure. Yeah. So my favorite tip is definitely, really, I mentioned this earlier, but really understanding who is looking to leverage a tool such as Ask Data, and just understand what kind of data that they are wanting to use as part of their NLP workflow. Understanding that will really help you think about structuring the data in a way that's much more interpretable. Ask Data does, in theory, work on all published data sources, but if you just have a bunch of really messy garbage data in there, it's not going to be very helpful for the end consumer, because ultimately that bridge between the physical data model and the human is really kind of the most critical intersection for Ask Data. We do a lot of enrichment and cool things with our semantic model to help bridge that gap. But the more you can do to make the data more interpretable by human, just makes the experience exponentially better for the user.
Awesome. Okay. Well, with that doesn't look like anyone has any other questions. So thank you for taking time out of your
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So creating data sources programmatically outside of Tableau, whether it's through APIs or third-party tools, is there the support yet to either enable or disable Ask Data? Or do we have to wait till the data source is published and then go in and manually enable or disable it?
Yeah, so the two options that you have is you can programmatically control the permissions using the connect permissions. So if you toggle the connect permissions off, it disables Ask Data, but it also disables authoring. However, if you want to just not mess with sort of the connect permissions, you would have to publish the data source to the server and then manually turn Ask Data off at that data source.
Okay. And is all that documented?
Yes.
Online?
That
Okay.
is definitely online.
Could you talk to maybe some of the top 5 features or whatever that might be in development now or being prioritized?
Sure. So I can speak through a few things. One, we're really, as I mentioned, we're investing in sort of the semantic layer of Ask Data and just the general Tableau platform. So the synonyms is a really big focal point. We're working towards enabling value level synonyms in addition to field synonyms, as well as using data roles to programmatically recommend synonyms. So a lot of work is being done sort of in that semantic layer. So that's like, a top 1-2 thing that's happening. The second is calculations. We've received a lot of feedback around being able to compute dynamic calculations through natural language. In 2019.2, we've enabled a few simple calculations like sum, difference, multiple, and ratios of 2 measures. And we're continuing to expand on top of that to enable more sophisticated table calculations. So we're starting with table calculations like year-over-year and month-over-month comparisons, and then we'll continue to kind of flush those out and add additional ones as well. So table calculations is a really exciting one as well. And then we're also, as I mentioned earlier, looking at making Ask Data much more ubiquitous in the platform. So there's a lot of foundational innovation that's happening to enable asking questions of a visualization. So we're working towards a world where you can ask questions directly of a viz and ultimately from the dashboard itself. So those are some of the few really interesting features that are on our near-term roadmap.
Very cool. And a question that Andy had, I think everyone on the call would probably be interested in this one. Would you or anyone on the team ever be willing to possibly do like remote presentations about Ask Data for user groups?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'll do is I'll send my contact information, or Jordan already has it, so she can send that contact information out at the end of this email or at the end of this session. And please reach out at any time. You would like someone from our team to present at user group. We'd be more than happy to figure out how to make that possible.
Awesome. All right. Anyone else have anything last minute? Okay.
Thanks, Ruha.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for taking time out of your morning, Ruha. Really appreciate it. This was great. For you guys, feel free to shoot me an email if you felt like this was helpful or not. See if we want to keep doing stuff like this in the future. And yeah, I'll make sure to send a link to the recording with those resources Ruha mentioned, as well as his email address, so you guys can get in touch with him. But I hope everyone has an awesome weekend.
Thanks for your time and thanks for the great questions.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.